Hi, good morning, everyone.
Hi, Debayan. How are you?
Morning.
Hi, Sandeep.
Hi.
I see Nancy. Somak's
Hi.
here.
Hi, Professor.
Hi,
Hi,
hello.
Debayan. Hi.
Hi, hello.
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 Yeah,
Hmm.
I think we just have a couple more minutes, and then we can start. It's 11:58. We can start exactly at 12. And thank you everyone for joining.
Thank you.
So I have a hard cutoff, Debayan. So might actually drop off a few minutes before because I have to get to Delhi by 3. But
Okay, so I won't give you anything right at the end then.
right at the end, yeah, I might drop off a few minutes. Thanks.
Am I audible?
Yeah, Professor, you are. Hi, Professor. Good
Hi,
morning.
PPC.
Morning.
Morning. Wow, you're in San Francisco. Wow.
Yeah, I'm just ahead of time. That's where I'm supposed to be with your folks.
Yeah, of
Next
course.
week.
I know. Next week indeed. My thing is swapped, isn't it? The Ashoka logo is swapped for some reason.
No, it's looking correct from our side.
Oh, good. From me,
You are seeing a mirror image.
You are seeing the inverted. From our side, it's looking fine.
oh, good. More light.
I think we can start, and people will keep joining in and join the conversation. So, first of all, good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us on this lovely Saturday morning. It's a very special conversation for us at high school programs at Ashoka because we are hosting some of our beloved faculty from Ashoka University and also Professor PPC, who's as much Ashoka by now as much he's IIT, I think. Thanks a lot again to all the faculty members joining us. We know how difficult it is for you to take this kind of time, but we're very, very grateful to see you here, and we're very, very excited to hear everything that you have to say. Just a little introduction about what we are doing here. So this conversation is a part of what we call the educator series here at high school programs at Ashoka. We do it every month, and the conversation is primarily on topics and issues that high schoolers currently may be thinking about or dealing with, or conversations that can help them make more aware decisions as they enter their future. But this conversation primarily is for high school educators, administrators, and counselors who are working with these students, who are trying to give them a direction for their future, trying to prepare them for what is to come. So we welcome everyone in the audience too. And I will now let Debayan take charge. Debayan is a faculty at Ashoka University in the Computer Science Department. And he is one of the most excited people I've met in my life. So thanks so much,
Excited or
Debayan. Excited and exciting. So in YSP during Young Scholars Program, we have this tradition called Kabutarja, where we give students these postcards that they can write to faculty, talking about how their experience with them was. And I think Debayan is one of those professors at Ashoka who get the most number of Kabutarjas. So he's already very popular with the high schoolers. And he's the moderator for today. He will also introduce everyone else on the panel. So Debayan, over to you.
Thank you so much, Nancy, for that lovely introduction. I don't know how moderate I can be since my reputation seems to be one of a fire starter. But welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. Let me perhaps first start. Nancy, could you just move us to speaker mode? I think you have yourself spotlighted, or gallery mode, so we can just get everyone. Sure. And while you do that, let me just give everyone just a little bit of background on how we're going to go about this. We have a lot of stuff to cover. This is the kind of things we're going to discuss today. These are things that involve government deliberations that go on for months, if not years, right? It takes a long time to make sense of what's going on in the education field. We're going to be quick, which means I'm going to ask everyone to be short and sweet and crisp all at the same time. And I will briefly ask everyone to introduce themselves the first time they speak. And if you forget, don't worry, I'll just do that after you finish speaking. All right. We'll try to keep every answer to about a couple of minutes. And what I'll also do is I'll ask everyone to just avoid buzzwords. I think that was one of the questions that I shared, that, we keep using words like holistic, and a lot of students don't actually know what that means. They know the dictionary meaning, but they don't know what we mean when we say that. So for them, especially also for the counselors who are listening and teachers and administrators, let's try to say, what I mean by that is, and let's just say that second part, because I think in our internal conversations, we're used to certain terms, and we want to avoid those for now. Okay, so let's get started. I think a lot of the conversations that we have about education today is an information asymmetry. It's a fear of the unknown, right? The world is changing so very quickly. If you asked me 10 years ago what the most in-demand jobs were today, I'd just be completely wrong, right? And it's not just me, most people would be completely wrong. And in this incredibly fast-changing world where, it feels like every 5 years the world is speeding up, we are trying to create a syllabus. We're trying to prepare our children for jobs and careers and satisfied lives tomorrow. Today's syllabus is useless tomorrow, right? How, in this kind of extremely unstable environment, what is the objective of a college education? Now, warning, saying things like fundamentals is easy but too vague, right? And we all agree that this return on investment viewpoint is incorrect, but it's also true that it's ubiquitous. Given this reality, what are the principles around which, if we are looking for a high quality STEM education, what should teachers and students do? What are the core principles around which a high quality education in the sciences should be designed? And I'm going to start by going to Somak.
Okay, thanks, Debayan. Thank you. Just to introduce myself, I'm Somak Raychaudhury. I am the Vice Chancellor of Ashoka University and also Professor of Physics. I am an astrophysicist. I trained as a physicist and then as an astronomer. And I've been, teaching in various university environments, as well as worked at research institutes abroad and in India for 3 decades now. To answer, to address Debayan's question, of course, it's a very broad based broadband question, I would say that the nature of education has changed fundamentally over our lifetime. And certainly, as Debayan pointed out, the syllabus of how, or the mode in which we deliver science education right now in universities and particularly in vocational institutions has to change in a big way, and it's changing. The change is much slower in India compared to the global scale. But we now know that our traditional mode of education is the transfer of knowledge, transfer of information, where a teacher would come into class and gather a lot of references, a lot of information, and help the students understand that information and transfer that information to the students. That is completely now out of the window, I think, because in our current situation, as well as moving forward, I think the amount of information that's available to any student or anybody who wants to come to we had. And giving information or interpreting information in a certain way is less important than empowering the student to be able to interpret in their own way the information that's available, to discern from information that is confusing and unfounded to things that have a scientific basis, to understand what is right, quote unquote, and what is confusing and maybe unfounded, and also to be able to take clues from diverse sources and get an idea of how to solve real life problems based on the information that is available to you. More importantly, at a more advanced level, it is important for the student to then be able to design experiments to actually make up tests that would help them understand the difference between two situations to figure out what is right and what is wrong. These things are some of the basic things that one needs to pick up at university. And so we have to start thinking in terms of skills that students acquire, in terms of problem solving skills, as well as also real skills that one needs to acquire to be able to interpret this information. That's my viewpoint as the basic, I think, of STEM education right now, that across the board in all subjects, we need to establish as a method of education. I'll let the others speak and I can come back to this later.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much. I'm glad I asked you to explain what fundamentals mean. That was very, very useful. And I'll probably come back to some other people as well on the same topic. But first, I'd like to go to PPC. Somak explained a certain background of things, how to think about the world, how to puzzle solve, essentially the scientific method, but he really sort of drilled down on it and helped us think about how students can think of new experiments and so on and so forth. We live in a world right now where suddenly everyone is diving into a little new thing called ChatGPT, Claude, and so on and so forth, right? How do you see the advent of AI changing the way we educate, the way we learn? And just as a sort of explanation of what's going on in the back of my head while I talk about this is I'm remembering this old news, it's probably a joke, but there's this apocryphal newspaper article that is a headmaster, school headmaster, who's furious, and he's writing in the newspaper that children are writing on paper nowadays. They don't know how to write on slate. What will you do when the paper runs out? Children need to learn to write on slate. And I very much fear that in some of my assignments, when I tell my kids, don't use AI, right, for a particular assignment. Another assignment might be open book. And I'm always sort of not terrified, but worried that am I training people in a restricted way, which is going to be useless to them? Or how should we look at this new age of education where even the making up of experiments that Somak talked about I can probably type that into any of these bots and get a reasonably good result. On the other hand, at the same time, and I'll ask all the educators and others here to check this out. I was joking about this just yesterday with some friends at IIT Bombay. You can type in something like, how many Indian states have the letter S in their name or letter W in their name or whatever, and it gives a completely nonsensical result, right? It thinks Mizoram has W and Maharashtra has a Q or some such nonsense, right? And yet, half our students are using these things, especially in high school and early college education, for their assignments. What are we to do?
Yeah, for each of us who are getting obsolete almost every month with the advent of all these new technologies, I think, you asked how should we teach? So the teachers are facing a problem. The students are facing a different problem. And the new generation who will grow up knowing this as the basis of education will face a third new problem. So these are three. We have to realize that the teachers are facing one kind of a problem. The students who are at least one or two generations down the line are facing a different kind of a environment. And those who will be native AI born will face a different kind of. So at this point in time, there are three things which are very important. One is the ability to determine what is right and what is wrong. So somebody will give you a solution. So in all of STEM, whenever you have some question in mind, there are two parts to the question. One is, do you have a solution? And second, if you have a solution, can you validate that solution? Do you know whether it is correct or not? So these two are becoming equally important now. Now you have a tool or an oracle or a great grandfather or a grand uncle who knows all the subjects and who is going to give you some answers. But in many cases, all the answers are not necessarily correct. So you have to be discerning enough to know what the right answer is. Therefore, you must have three kinds of capabilities now. One is the ability to be able to understand and solve and resolve the problems on your own without the aid of any tool. The second is to gather the solution using a tool. And the third most important thing that is going to come up is that it is not just the tool and you, but it is you, the tool, and others, because it's all about a collaborative peer environment. It is not just no longer, if we look at the future of social media of education, it is not going to be me and ChatGPT. It is going to be me and ChatGPT and everybody else. So this whole dimension is of three-pronged nature. And the education that we now provide must enable the students to be able to address it on their own, to be able to use a tool to address it, and then use their own knowledge to or other tools to check whether this answer is relevant, important, a solution or not. And third is to collaborate and network with the community to be able to gather the answer. This is how people are learning nowadays, and this is how we must enable them to learn. So in my class, I actually give a problem, ask them, without your phones, solve it. Now solve it with your phone. Now discuss in the class and solve it. And with these three things, the learning becomes more interesting and important, and the teacher becomes a semi-student in the class. Only when you have done this, you will overcome your fears, and the whole nature of learning will be more enriching. This is my viewpoint, and this is from experience.
That is fantastic. Thank you so much. And to the audience, PPC, I should formally introduce him as he's a professor at IIT Kharagpur, and he's the former director of IIT Kharagpur. But I think from many people that I've met, he is the personification of the place. So I've heard at least one person mention, oh, PPC, he is the IIT Kharagpur. So he has become indistinguishable from what he represents at this point. So thank you so much for that wealth of experience, PPC. Now I'm going to turn to Professor Anurag Agarwal. And my question for you is, given this changing environment, and we've heard about this from an astrophysicist and a computer scientist, I want to, and I'll sort of switch tack a little bit, that all of this stuff that is going on, there is one field that is healthcare, medicine, and the biosciences, where all of these questions go from being hypothetical to being all too real, right? How do you see education changing in the biosciences in general? And especially given the topic of this, how do you see a pure sort of non-MBBS career looking in this context?
Great, Debayan. So by way of introduction, I head bioscience at Ashoka. The Trivedi School of Biosciences is the place where I am. By history, I'm a physician by training, now more identify as a scientist. I guess, Debayan, the point I would like to make here is to continue with the line you were going. What is healthcare outside MBBS and health science? And to be very honest, health sciences was always much more than MBBS. It's now in the age of AI information with direct to beneficiary transmission of information. We're realizing that the person in the middle is often going to change. And I think there is a tremendous scope these days for people who are interested in health, but are not directly going to be involved in treating patients, but in creating a reimagination of the health ecosystem to come in. And if I go back to what PPC said, once upon a time, information was the key. You owned a book, that book contained information about health. You used to read that book and tell other people about health. Today, information is absolutely commoditized. Anybody can get it. But the risk is misinformation. So, and when you come to a subject like biology, in which I often joke to my students, half of what you know is wrong, you don't know which half, because it's continuously evolving. As new tools keep coming from the hard sciences, physics, etc., you like to investigate deeper into sciences like biology, and you find new stuff that had never been known before. For example, all these years we thought brains had no lymphatics. Now we know they do. Better imaging comes and you learn something brand new. And I'm sure that's even true about the universe, but in biology, it's very, very obvious. So in this condition, what Somak initially referred to, the ability to handle multiple possible explanations, determine the most probable one, discard the ones unlikely to be true, absolutely critique and remove the ones likely to be harmful. This judgment is what the student of tomorrow will need. Information will no longer be the primary thing. Remembering books would no longer be the primary thing. And I think this education, how would it come? It would come beyond nuanced discussion of information to learning how to think, period. And this learning how to think would cut across subjects. I mean, even if you wanted to do was health, biosciences may not be your only field. You could come at it from an angle of economics, of society, of anthropology, humanities. In fact, that's why I think that health sciences in the future will not come out of medical schools, but rather universities. I'm going to stop there for a while.
Thank you so much, Anurag. And I agree with you completely on that last bit, because to my mind, and this is a very naive way of looking at it perhaps, by the time a person goes to a doctor, especially in a place like India, in some sense, it's already too late.
Yep.
I'm not turning up at my GP until I'm half dead, right? So by that point in time, it's already, it's patchwork, it's band-aids. So I think the the last minute of that was particularly valuable. Thank you so much for that, Anurag. Professor Alok Bhattacharya, I'll come to you next. And what I'd like to ask you is just going in the train of thought that Anurag had started, this the way students should think about their education and so on and so forth. One of the biggest problems that our students have, and I speak to a lot of high schoolers, I speak to a lot of first years especially, is that there's too much going on, right? Especially in the sciences. Every day there is a new CRISPR, there's carbon nanotubes, there's AI, there is this, that, blockchain, and there's too many things to possibly explore, right? For a student who is interested in having a STEM career, who is interested, but they don't know quite what to do. And very often the reason they're interested is a certain amount of early positive reinforcement. I thought I liked biology. Why? Because I got good marks in biology, right? Why? Because I could draw well. I thought I liked physics because I got good marks in physics. There's a certain feedback loop there. What is your advice for students and educators to think about what areas to choose? Because there's too much to choose, and perhaps marks isn't the best indicator anyway. How do we pick?
Well, just to give introduction, I'm professor of biology at Ashoka, and before that, I taught several decades in JNU, Jawaharlal Nehru University, the biology. I was originally trained as a chemist, so my approach to biology is very, very different. I think this complexity of teaching biology, and let me tell you that the biology taught in school is very different from what we think it's the way it should be taught in. Actually, unlike the general feeling is that biology, you have to remember, you have to draw the diagrams, you have to all these things. And I think that's a kind of a wrong notion in terms of the way to go about it. There is a bunch of concepts that you have. And just to take Debayan from your point of CRISPR and gene editing, there's only few basic concepts there. And the concept actually comes from this whole area of DNA repair, recombination. And if you actually learn those, just few concepts, then picking up all the new CRISPRs, all the new enzymes will not take much difficult. But the original idea that comes in, I think, and that's sort of something that is very, very important, that we should distill biology into a set of concepts. And rest the details, people can work it out on themselves, can be worked out as a problem, etc. I also want to bring out at this point that we are at a very, very important stage for the world, for our society, because of this whole issue of climate change and their effect on us. I think it's very, very important for us, and biology and other areas like chemistry, etc., and health sciences can be taught as a coordinated way to teach people being aware of this whole thing. And how we can go about bringing solutions. Everybody should be aware of the impact of climate change and what it can actually do to us. Understanding the science behind it could be very, very important for us. And our students and every young people should know if they are going to be responsible citizens for the future. Of course, there will be a group of people who want to go and do more research and do it. But in general, every student should be aware of the whole impact of climate change and this thing. And finally, I'll say that biology is an observation science. And I think it's very, very important for us to be able to observe, whether we observe with naked eye or we observe with machines. Those are different things. One hand to, and this power of observation is something we should ingrain in the people. People miss out, people can look at a figure, and this is something that I teach. I show figures and then ask people to observe what all things that they see in this. and there'll be interesting things that came out. People do miss out some of the very important issues in this, and that's something that we should ingrain in our teaching methods.
Thank you so much. You reminded me of both Bruce Lee and Sherlock Holmes. Sherlock famously told Watson, you see, but you do not observe. You've come up these stairs so many times, but I know that there are precisely, I think he said it was 12
In fact,
steps or
Debayan,
17.
I give that example of Sherlock Holmes.
Fantastic. And Bruce Lee, of course, says, man points at the moon, you're looking at the finger and so on. I'll come to Professor Sandeep Juneja now. And I'll turn that observation upon ourselves, right? The higher education system. Ashoka is trying to, we'll figure out whether we've been successful or not in the coming decades. It takes a long time, right? Universities incubate slowly, but Ashoka is trying to do something different. The question is, why? And I think a large part of that is something that is felt by educators, just normal citizens, children, everybody, that there is something we've been doing wrong. We have these endless competitive exams, so much hard work. We have this knowledge that if you're clever, you must become a doctor or an engineer, and that's it. And I have a second cousin who's an accountant, and you can maybe do that, and maybe a lawyer, but nothing outside of that, God forbid, right? There's this hierarchy of subjects in our head, and we fight so hard, right? And in fact, it's so much so that, movies like Three Idiots became so famous, not just because of the story and the acting, but because it resonated with people, right? Now, even after all of this, even after all of this pain, the outcomes are not ideal, right? We are seeing all of these newspaper articles, even from return on investment perspectives, people are not getting placed. We are seeing not a very high quality of research compared to the effort, frankly, and the overall storyline. We train millions of engineers, but our own bridges are falling apart. Right? What are we doing wrong? What do you think is going on? And do introduce yourself.
Okay, my name is Sandeep Juneja. I'm an applied probabilist. For most of my career, lately, I'm trying to reinvent myself as a learning theory, data science person. So I'm in the computer science department in Ashoka. I just came here this year, 6 months ago, and I was in TIFR for 23 years before that. I'm also leading the data science, learning and decision sciences effort. It's a center at Ashoka. Now, your question is, of course, very big, right? One is, what is Ashoka doing? What is the nation doing? So there are all kinds of questions being asked there. But I mean, I guess, and just combining everything that you've been saying, we ask ourselves, okay, the world is changing very fast. Everything, which we are seeing right now may not be relevant a few years later. But what is it that we want to teach now that we as students learned? I mean, there are certain essential things that remain. And that's probably going to be, it just goes back to the purpose of education. So, whether it was kind of basics of mathematics, which helps us think deeply, critically, clearly, the foundational discoveries of science, appreciating them, how they explain the universe, the humanities, how that makes us understand ourselves better, improve our critical thinking. All of that is there. That's going to remain in the curriculum. That's going to be in the curriculum 100 years later as well, with some tweaks here and there. So that's something to keep in mind. What Ashoka is doing well is exactly on kind of, having this foundational focus. So we are saying that as students should have this overall well-rounded personality where they get introduced to the kind of the fundamental ideas that you want me to define further. But they get exposed to the philosophers, they get exposed to the humanities, and also the underlying ideas in sciences and quantitative methods. That's very important. And all of this is very important so that they discover the passion in themselves. What do they want to do? In every scenario as the world evolves, it's the people who have passion, who are committed to their subject, who feel very strongly for it. Those are the people who are going to make a difference. Those are the kind of students we want to cultivate. So that's something that our system should do more of. I think Ashoka is doing a great start by trying to have more well-rounded students. Now, other than that, I guess we all have to stay in touch with the world at large. So there is so much information being generated. Every year we generate more information than we generated for all of our history thus far. And that trend is also going to continue to some extent. And we are having this chat GPTs and robots who are going to play a greater and greater role in the world that we live in. And, so we will make, as a person, we'll be effective if we know how to use these tools very well. So our education has to prepare us for a new world where we can, we should certainly not get left out. Every student should know how to use the new evolving technologies, work with them to be useful to the world that's emerging. To your point, I think, about where India is going wrong in terms of research and education, that's a very broader debate. I think overall, we need to improve and responsibility is also going to come down to the caliber of faculty that we have in all the universities. We have to think of kind of raise their level, maybe have stronger PhD students coming in, feeding into the educational system, and that then helps us improve your system. But that's a longer debate. I'll keep quiet on that for now.
Sure. And there's a few audience questions. I'll come to that in just a minute or two. I'll go back to Somak now, and I'll just mention, when Professor Juneja was talking about inculcating curiosity. I remember some time back, I was talking to the student about, they were writing an essay, and they wrote, they're saying for some higher studies application, and then they wrote, "I love chemistry," right? And I had this conversation with him that, you can't just say that. What does that mean? You have to demonstrate it. Talk about what you love. If you love someone, if you love something, you don't talk about it in that tone. You tell a story. Just reading it should make me believe that you love it. And I think that idea about passion, about curiosity is absolutely critical. I'm thinking back to my time as a student when you were talking about this, and I just hated all the subjects. I would just wait for break time so I could go outside and play football or whatever, right? And so my choices of subjects were not based on what I liked because I disliked everything. It was on what I could tolerate combined with what my parents pointed me towards. Right. And there was an expectation from society that if you get this kind of marks, you go into this sort of subject, and that's that. How do we, and this brings me to my question, Somak. We live in a reality where students are channelized towards certain careers. They are told that if you are doing ABC, if you're getting this kind of grade, you should get a BTech because that's a reasonable career, and therefore something happens. Similarly, in the equivalent in the biosciences field would be MBBS. Similarly, there are a couple of other, especially professional style degrees, that people, for very good reason perhaps, because they're parents who care about their children and want them to succeed, and with a certain definition of monetary success in their heads. How realistic is that? I don't want to frame the question by asking how do we change that, because that begs the question that it does need to be changed.
Yeah.
So I want you to answer both. Does that need to change? And if so, how and why?
And I'll give you my perspective. When somebody says I love chemistry, they don't love the subject as a whole, because that doesn't mean anything. They love some aspect or some story or something that somebody has told them about chemistry. We in school get to like teachers, the anecdotes they say, things that they do in class, etc., rather than subjects themselves. Somebody in their wisdom in the 19th century, in the UK possibly, sat down and divided certain subjects and gave them names, right, that we adopted in this country. For example, I'll tell you one thing. I was always fascinated by the fact that you could even measure how old the Earth is, right? Now, you can, if you ask how you measure how old the Earth is, you would see that A geologist will come and claim that they found out the way to do it. An astronomer will come and tell you how they would do it. A chemist would come and tell you how they would do it. A physicist will come and tell you how they would do it. And so would a biologist, because they have all different ideas of how time evolves and how the Earth's age is related to that, right? So this is not a wonderful question. And if you think about it, how you try to do this from different ways, tied to a particular subject that is defined as physics, etc. And what happened in our education system is that we paid too much attention to these labels. So much so that when you come to university to study biology, you're only allowed to study chemistry and certain subjects, and not other things which are so closely related, even physics, even mathematics, even geology, even sociology and anthropology, which are essentially applied biology. So the thing is, these labels are taken too seriously. Now, in the context of your question, this is going to be very, very important now. I mean, right now, in order to get jobs, you need these trajectories. These trajectories are connected to these labels that you're talking about. So you have to do physics and mathematics or chemistry in order to get somewhere. That is no longer relevant. It's already becoming less and less relevant. For professional subjects, I can see that in order to become a lawyer, you need a law degree. In order to become a doctor, you need a medical degree. But the nature of the medical degree is also now becoming very, very diffuse, in the sense, as you said yourself. I mean, a doctor has to know so many other skills that just the medical degree is not enough. And similarly, an engineer, so many people go into the IITs to do engineering. In order to actually become then job ready, they have to do many other things, like go into management or learn other skills in order. So I think the future of education is not labeling certain trajectories, but you will find that in order to get to a certain success in life, in jobs, you have multiple trajectories coming together, blending together information, kinds of information that you need in order to get to a certain stage where you are considered a leader, or you're considered a senior in a certain field. As far as I'm concerned, if that is how things are going to work, I'd rather choose a trajectory that I'll enjoy. So I think students should find their own way of becoming job ready or future ready, choosing trajectories in which they enjoy. If they enjoy certain parts of chemistry and certain parts of biology and certain parts of computer science, they should be able to blend all that together in their career trajectory, and then figure out what they want to do, what they're good at, right? And in this process of self-discovery will come through actually choosing things that they actually enjoy learning. I'll stop there.
Yeah, thank you so much. And there was a question from the audience about isn't the industry driving this? Because recruiters are just going to look for a certain degree and do things in certain ways and so on. To an extent, and I'll try to partially answer that. I don't think that's true anymore. I think there is an assumption that we've made 20 years ago, and we're just going on with it without really thinking that through. I think that if you look at the number of layoffs you're seeing from even top companies, is evidence of that in a way. That as we are, since we are assuming that certain metrics are enough, this is what always happens, right? You decide on a series of things you want, and then you create a metric to measure it, and everyone then pursues the metric. This happens, you say that, oh, we want education, let's make grades to measure how well we're educating, and then everyone only cares about the grades, right? And so if you only care about the degrees, what happens is companies, when they fall on hard times, or they just decide they want to make more profit and so on and so forth, guess who will be the first to go, right? So it does not make for a stable long-term career. What you will get are initial good placements. That's it. And I think companies have begun to understand this very, very well. It is, by the way, the case that for a very long time, people have this idea that, oh, companies would definitely not hire useless people, right? What have they've been making profit for? So it's not true. I highly recommend, if you'll excuse the language, the title of the book, Bullshit Jobs by the famous David Graeber. where he goes and interviews people at jobs, and he estimates about 33% of jobs are basically useless. And people know it. And so I think we're beginning to see a phase of reality right now where that rubber stamped metric degree is not the key to a long-term career. It is the key only to short-term spurts. And if you don't have that staying power, you're in deep trouble, because searching for a job at 40 is infinitely more difficult than searching for a job at 22, right? Let me bring the conversation back now, perhaps to Anurag sir. There's a certain story that Somak just told about, and I love telling my students this in with the good old poem of the seven blind men and the elephant, right? That nature does not silo itself, right? And just because we have siloed ourselves, and let's say I have studied only physics and I don't understand how a phenomenon is working, nature doesn't care. But interdisciplinarity is hard, not least because of logistical difficulties, right? You how do you hire teachers? How do you handle already syllabuses are too large? How do you get multiple areas in there in a way that doesn't sort of destroy the student's life, right? What is a pathway to having a better understanding of reality, which we've all agreed is really important for a long-term career? We realize, of course, that the current 18th century, somebody drew lines, somebody drew an India-Pakistan line. Similarly, somebody just drew lines across subjects, and that has caused us trouble ever since. But what do we do about it? What is the solution?
No, I think Somak made a great point that these are just artificially created lines. And within this, the interdisciplinarity, you can think of it as three levels. I mean, first is multidisciplinarity, which obeys exactly those lines, but puts multiple departments on the same campus, which really means nothing. Inter really means that a few people from different departments start working with each other. And then, of course, there is this transdisciplinarity. And for example, sometimes, like, Alok said, he trained as a chemist and became a biologist, and biochemistry is a word. At this point, you can't any longer say that a biochemist is a chemist or a biologist. They are simply biochemists. And it came because of certain types of problems that required these people to solve it. Now, there are a variety of very famous people at any given time. Recently, with the Nobels going out, and Demis Hassabis getting the Nobel for chemistry for his work from DeepMind, there is a very famous quote he makes in his company Isomorphic Labs that spun off Google DeepMind. He says that just as maths is the language of physics, AI will become the language of biology. And the point he's really trying to make is that a reductionist view that has classically been done in biology was suitable for answering simple things. But if you want to look at the full elephant, the data is going to be simply so complex that apart from looking at it from the lens of large data science, you can't make sense of complex systems like biology. Yet, on the other hand, we have an education system in which everybody who loved maths in school automatically decides, I don't like biology because it involves too much of drawing of things. And as again Alok said, school biology is so different from college biology or biology research careers or just biology in general. So I think the key point towards what you were really asking me about interdisciplinarity is to realize that these artificial divisions of subjects, these assumptions that if you like maths and physics, you should become an engineer. If you don't like maths, you should become a doctor. If you want to do a humanities, you don't want like STEM. I think these are very, very artificial things. Today, I can think of great people doing social science work using deep mathematical tools, modeling societies, people interactions in silico. So I think these are partly driven, I would say, even by parents, the way things are taught in school, and universities need to take a lead in communicating what we are doing today, that these are very artificial boundaries. Once we break these boundaries, all the synergy will be automatic. after that. Sorry to be long-winded.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And I think the bit that you said about universities getting more involved, that probably answers one of the questions that some people asked. Now I'm going to go to all of you with the questions, and anyone can feel free to answer. Just to avoid sort of clashes, I'd recommend you just raise your hand before you unmute, ideally. If not, I'll just cold call people. I think that I'm sort of reading a bunch of the questions and putting them together, but I'll actually read out some of the more repetitive ones, right? There are people who are talking about everyone is just studying just for cracking NEET, right? Another person asks, how do you even identify the passion for anything specific, as one is always running behind all subjects to get good marks based on teachers' feedback and parents' expectations? Immediately after that, another similar question. How do we develop love and curiosity for a subject without just focusing on marks and ranking, right? The next one is another student asking the exact same question, exact same question, exact same question. I've got like 12 questions, and I can honestly say this is nothing to do with, just us talking at Ashoka and whatever. I've seen this in my classes, right? How do you develop love for a subject? That to many is the most burning question in students' minds. I remember I gave students in one of my classes an assignment, and I said that, look, this is a small percentage of your grade. It's completely open. You have complete freedom in how you answer this question. Here are 5 sort of interrelated questions. I want you to think about it and answer it. And you have complete freedom. You can do whatever you want, right? The first question I got was how many pages? The second question I got was single space, double spaced. The third question I got was what's the font size? And this is what students are coming back with when they're told you have complete freedom, right? And we're getting this repeat. I can't tell you how many questions. There's a bunch of these, and they're all coming back to the same question again and again and again and again and again. Some of it has to do with we haven't been exposed. We don't know. We're limited to what concepts we've been exposed to. So they decide their career trajectory based on that. How can we solve this? So I'd like to go to Professor PPC and then Professor Alok Bhattacharya with this. And then there's a couple of other questions.
The only subject which is most important, and we don't teach it to most students in college, which is very, very important, is philosophy. If you don't teach philosophy, then they tend to become what industry needs, a machine cloaked in a human body. So I think it is very, very important to tell them that you have come not to an ice cream parlor to buy ice cream of a variety that you want. You have come to become a product which will be manufactured out of this university, a versatile product which will be as powerful and more than the AI tool that you use. That is number one. So unless we teach philosophy, which we don't, we just take them through different subjects and make them machines cloaked in a human body. So that is number one. Number two is that we do not, as others have been trying to say, is that what we need to do is to show how biology can change computer science. If you like biology, you will be able to see how you can change computing. If you like maths, you can show how maths can be used to change bio. If you like physics, you can use physics to show how you can change economics. And this sort of movement across disciplines will start giving them joy. And let me tell you that the current AI tool is the language. Otherwise, you're teaching them a language called mathematics, or you're teaching them a language called physics, And then they see that this language does not enable them to walk in this world with everything else. But today, this new language that is coming up is the language of AI. It is the integrated language that combines knowledge of all disciplines and lets us move across. So I think, we must very, very deeply understand the power of AI to bring interest using all these questions, curiosity, what can I do, and things like that. That is on one side. On the other side, somehow, we must tell them that you should not become machines. And for that, we must, really include certain things in the curriculum, which we have completely avoided.
Thank you. Professor Bhattacharya, I'd like you to answer part of this as well, but also from, maybe you can concretize this. Just imagine, there's a young student, she's been told certain things that you're good at this, you're not good at that. How does she go forward? Let's try and concretize. And Sandeep, did you put up your hand perhaps? Okay, so I'll just come to you after this. Professor
Yeah.
Bhattacharya.
So a lot of people come to me and study, particularly people want to do interface chemistry or biology or things like that. And my advice is to learn as much as you can. Read whatever you can read. I remember as a school student, got hold of a book called 1, 2, 3 Infinity. I don't know if any of you, Somak may remember that. It's an amazing book. Somehow or other, I had made up my mind not to go for physics or something like that, but that book was amazing. I still remember these days, and I have a copy of it. Learning whatever can hold up, whatever interests you, whatever you see and observe. I mean, we have to learn about not only Earth, universe, everything, and everything is interconnected. I think that's something that all students should know. And if you learn physics of something, that may lead to, some of the understanding of the properties of some of the molecules, and then from biological system, etc., etc. So at some level of complexity, all things are related, and as much as you can learn, then later on you can decide which one to pursue further. But whatever you've learned at this stage will be maybe someday useful, because your aim is to learn about the world, and maybe you can use it.
Thank you so much, Alok. And I can't agree enough with you. 1, 2, 3 Infinity is a great book. George Gamow, I believe. And I also remember that my personal love for physics, there was this. Later I learned everything in it was wrong, but I loved that book. It's called Physics for Entertainment by Ya Perelman. Fantastically fun book. I got like a 15th hand copy from College Street or
Yeah, I had that too. It's absolutely fantastic. And it's not all wrong at all. It's very nice.
Yeah. So I think one of the and I'll come to you, Sandeep, and then Professor PPC. One of the things that I love about what you said, Professor Bhattacharya, is this idea of you don't know what's going to be important, and we have this completely false understanding that okay, if you're going to do this subject, you're going to be. So I'm a cryptographer by training. That's what I do, right? I also dabble in all sorts of other things, but even within a narrow subfield of cryptography, I assure the audience you won't believe the wide variety of things that are required, right? So this idea that, oh, I know here are the 5 things you need to know to follow this career, that is simply and categorically wrong. Okay. I'll go over to Professor Sandeep Juneja now, and then PPC, sir.
No, I just had a very concrete point. Students tell me that they need to have a GPA above some thresholds and they get called for interviews, some job interviews. These top companies like McKinsey and all are coming and they have these thresholds. My guess is if you were to correlate how these students do in those jobs with their GPA, the correlation is going to be very poor. So really this as a shortlisting criteria often is detrimental in the sense a lot of these students, maybe if they were spent time with the employers, it's more the personality that really matters. that probably is more useful for them career-wise. So I would try to convince the employers, the companies who are coming on campus to try and not use this narrow criteria for kind of shortlisting candidates. I'd like to communicate with students that, don't get so obsessed by these marks, etc. The question was, how do we fall in love with a course? It's like with how do you fall in love with a person? Sometimes you have to spend enough time with it. So you have to spend enough time with it with patience, and then you find out, okay, what courses appeal to you most amongst the ones which are exposed to you. So this too much pressure and focus on grades and marks should be kind of discouraged in our mindset. Even in how we evaluate the students, in the messages we give them, we won't kind of think more highly of you if you get an A vis-a-vis a C. That's perfectly fine. We want you to kind of just develop a habit of enjoying the material that you're studying, get involved with it, and then find things which are great for you. So these are very concrete things. We want employers to kind of move away from too much of marks focus, and we want instructors also to communicate this to the students that, it should not be so much grade driven. And we, in our evaluation, also should not be very grade driven, that we also like students who do well in some course and we ignore the ones who don't do quite as well. Anyway, these are very concrete things.
Thank you so much. And before I go to Professor PPC, I'll just mention there was this little study that Google once did internally where they looked at job interview scores. So these are their internal scores post-job interviews, and they tallied it against how well those employees did in their career, and they were unable to find a correlation. Of course, by the way, to you folks at Google, this was a very badly run experiment because you're only looking at people who were hired. You should look at the careers of the people who weren't hired also, because otherwise you're taking into account if someone was hired despite a low interview score, they probably made up for it in some way, and therefore that's not a properly measured experiment. But our students, if they come to Ashoka, they will learn that in their QRMT courses. So they'll design better experiments than that. Professor PPC.
Yeah, so one small thing I think we should include in school and college education. When you like a subject, are we with today's technology and tools are able to provide them to do something to see it in action? Once you are able to, whatever they have learned in theory, books, pictures, cartoons, if they are able to do it and see something happening, I think that will slowly engage them better. So I think time has come for us to develop better engagement models, which could be customized. And today's digital age allows you to make all this, digital experiments to show everything almost live about how things happen. And I think, we must have more and more of these open labs where people can go and experiment and do things. This will slowly make them come to that innovation area, experience things, play with things, and meet people from other disciplines. I think that is very important because a 30-year-old earlier trained teacher is not going to be able to give what is required to the current generation unless they talk to each other and you enable them with everything else. It is only then they will find the passion. It is very unlikely that a teacher like me who studied this subject 45 years ago is going to give them such a spark of modern subject and its future that they will start running around for it. It is difficult.
Okay, and I think we'll end with that. The spark that lights the way into the future. I think that's, that comment you made about play is really important. I think the people who really succeed are the ones who are thinking about whatever it is while they're showering, while they're having fun. It doesn't feel like work anymore. And very few of us are lucky enough to have found that. And it requires something special to be able to, while everyone else is finding a distraction away from work, to find your distraction in work. I think that is something that's amazing. And I'll just end with a lovely little quote that my father always liked to tell me. This is from, I think, Longfellow. which is the heights by great men reached and kept were not attained by sudden flight, but they, while their companions slept, were toiling upward in the night. And with that, thank you so much for attending and have a wonderful weekend. Take care and bye-bye.
Hey, thanks everyone. Thank you for attending. And we've noted all your questions. I know a lot of audience questions have not been answered. We are going to try our best to compile responses to that and send it to all of you who have attended, because we have your email IDs. And thank you again. Please, keep an eye out on your email, because we will be sending you more information about similar conversations that we'll be holding in the coming months. Thank you and have a good day. Bye.